Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I'm from executeautomation.com. And today in this Selenium with Java course, we are going to talk about one more core Java concept, which is going to be looping statements. So we have spoken about our conditional statement in our last lecture, but this looping statement is yet another statement which are frequently used while we do automation testing and programming our code. And these conditional statements are used to repeatedly execute the code as a loop until certain condition that we have specified are met. That is what is the looping statement. And this is very, very important because if you saw in our last lecture, while the if condition matches that condition, it was printing that value and it came out of it. But what if I wanted to keep on looping until I have to print, let's say 5 times or 3 times, even if the condition satisfies? How do I do it? That's when the looping statements comes very, very handy. And that's what this looping statements is all about. There are 4 types of looping statements available in Java. One is the for loop. Another one is the for each loop. So for each loop is more like a more simplified version of the for loop. You also have got a while loop and a do while loop. To be honest, I will tell you what, most of the time you'll be using the first 3 of them. And that's what I'm going to be demoing as well, like for loop, the for each loop, and the while loop. Because I don't think most of the time you will have a situation where you'll be using do while loop in your automation testing. Most of the time, these 3 loops are going to be the one that you'll be ending up using it. Even while loop is quite rare. So I will just show you all these looping statement in this particular lecture, and you'll get more familiar and comfortable while you start writing the code with the looping. And now to demonstrate the looping operation, I'm going to get back to our arrays that we wrote, if you remember some times before, while we were talking about the arrays in the code, and I think I have removed all the code over there, but I'm going to be writing the looping code this time. So I'm going to go and add a new class file, and I'm going to call this as a looping statements, which we used to do all the time. And over here, I'm going to start writing the code for the for loop. So I'm going to say public static void for loop statements, and I'm going to say I wanted to print the fruits like 3 times or 4 times, whatever. So I'm just going to say string fruit, which I wanted to print, and I wanted to loop it for, let's say, 5 times. So if I want to print the value for the 5 times, then I'm going to get that parameter as well. So that is my methods, what is called as the parameter that I have passed in. I'm sorry, it's like count, probably not 5, which I'm going to pass in as a parameter for this method. So over here, I'm going to start writing the for loop this time. So I'm going to say for, this is a reserved keyword as well in Java once again. Over here with the for loop, the syntax is very, very straightforward. It is like a 3 parts that is being set on the for loop. The one is going to be the variable initialization, and then we have the next half, which is going to be condition, and then increment and decrement operator. So basically it's going to be like this. So initialization, and then it is going to have a condition, and then we're going to have an increment and or decrement, whatever that you wanted to do. You're going to have that over here. This is going to be the syntax of the for loop, basically. So I'm just going to add a line command over here, and based on the same syntax that we have, I'm going to write the code over here. So I'm going to say for initialization, you remember all the time when you do an initialization of a variable or whatever that we have written so far, we used to initialize the value like is equal to this. For instance, for the global name, we set the global name is equal to Karthik, something like that. Now on the looping statement, if I want to loop like 4 times or 5 times, I need to have like an initialization of an integer value, right? So I'm going to say if the int and primitive type, and I'm going to say if the int I is equal to 0, that is the initialization. And if the I, which is this value, is going to be less than or equal to the count which I'm going to be passing in for this method, which is going to be the count, then you keep on looping that value for me. So it's pretty much like an if condition, right? But it is also has got a looping operation. So it has an if condition, like a condition over here, but it also has an initialization and an increment and decrement operator in order to loop it for you. Until then, you keep on looping, if not to an I++. Okay, this is new, right? We have never discussed about it. So I++, like a plus is an operator in Java, which is going to do something like this. So it's the plus in Java is pretty much equivalent to I plus 1. So this is called as an operators in Java. We've never discussed about operators, but yeah, there are union operators and there are different types of operators available in Java. So basically, or essentially, for you to understand, the plus here stands like I plus 1. And that is what we are doing over here. So I'm going to say I plus plus, then open and close a braces there. So this is the for loop that we are going to be writing over here. And now I wanted to print the fruit which I'm going to be getting in. So I'm going to say system.out.println, and I'm going to do a bit of a tricky thing this time. The fruit, and I'm going to say plus fruit is printed for the times, which is going to be the I value, because the I value right now will have the value or the number of time the loop is going to happening. So I'm just going to put an I there. See, this is a bit tricky to read. Let me just bring it up. So I'm essentially saying that for I is equal to 0. So for the first time, I'm initializing the value as 0. And I wanted to keep on looping until the count is, if the I value is less than or equal to the count which I'm passing in, then if the value does not match, then keep on looping through until this number of time. This is like I++. And I'm going to say system.out.println, the fruit is printed for the times, and the I value will have like 0, 1, 2, and 3, something like that. I'm going to just run this code, and I will show you in a debug mode in the next minute. So for now, just bear with me. I'm going to close the conditional statement there. And let's comment the conditional statement. Now I'm going to get into the looping. So I'm going to say looping statements dot for loop statement. Sorry. Like that. I'm going to pass the fruit as an apple. And the number of times I want to print is like 5 times. And now if I try to run this code, you will see that I'm going to print this value from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Essentially, it is printing 6 times because the index value of the I is 0. And that's the reason why you're going to be getting like 0 as well. So you essentially have to pass 4 to get the value as 5. But you can change that as well. But as of now, just don't worry about it. I'll show you how you can do that. But at least you got the idea, right? Like now if I pass 5, I'm going to print this for 6 times. So if I say 10, I'm going to print this value for 11 times, including 0. You see that? So the fruit apple is printed for the times, number of times. So if I say like 1,000 or 10,000 like that, and if I execute this code, it is going to execute it for 10,000 times, 10,001 time for me on the console, as you can see over here. I mean, the console's memory is not enough to hold all the values, so it's just printing from 8,000. So yeah, 2,000 values, that's what it can hold. So this is how essentially you can do a looping operation. So now the most important part, which is like you being an engineer, you need to have a debugging to see what's really happening behind the scenes. So Control Shift B to do a debugger point being set. And now I'm going to hit this debugger and we'll see what's really happening behind the scene. So you see that now with the execution, use this expression. You remember the expression is quite handy. I'm going to click this plus button there. And if I put if I go to the variable, let's not use the expression because the expression holds the I is less than or equal to the count. You see that I cannot be resolved to the variable yet because the point has not been executed so far. So if I just do a step into it, this will be executed. But at least for now, you see that we have this value. But if I just go to the variable over here, and if I inspect this value, you see that the I cannot be resolved because the I is still not resolved yet. So let's say if I do a step into, you see that now the I value is 0 and the expression will also return as true this time because now it is matching. So you get this value. So you see that the first time the I's value is 0 and the code is going to be printing this value for me over here, which you know that. And let's do a step over. You see that now it's printing the fruit apple is printed for the first time with times as 0. Now it's going to the loop second time. The code block is coming back to the same line, the for loop, and it is going to do a step over. Let's do it. You see that now the I's value has turned into 1. That's why it became a yellow color there. So the IDE is representing that there is a change on that value. And the expression is still holding it true because the I is less than or equal to the count because the count value is 5. See, we also have that value there. And now it's going to print the value 1 for me. And now if I try to do a step over once again, you see that it's going to keep on printing that value for me every single time until the condition is going to fail. So now you see that this time while I try to do a step over, so it is still going to be count is less than or equal to that value. But see, now this time what is going to happen, like for the 5 time it has printed, the 6th time when it comes to the looping statement, this condition is going to just fail because the count is 5 and the 5 is not less than or equal to 5, right? So the condition is going to fail there. So let's see if I just do a step over. You see that the count has got failed and the execution has come out of the for loop and it has come to the end of the method execution. So which means the code execution is completed. So this is how you actually do a looping with a for loop within your code. And this is very, very straightforward while you do it in this fashion. So I hope you got the idea of the for loop. And this is very, very essential component for you to understand. The next thing which I'm going to talk about is going to be the for each loop operation. So in order for do the for each loop, I'm going to write one more method just in case, because that is very straightforward. So public static void for each loop statement. And here for this time, for the first time within our code block, I'm going to be writing a string array as a parameter. Look at that. And I'm going to say names, which I'm going to be passing in as a parameter for this method. Now you're wondering, Karthik, what are you trying to do here? Why are you passing a string array and names in here? See, my idea is this. So let's say I have an array of all the names. I want to print all the names one by one. You remember while we were trying to do the string array operation using this var names is equal to new of string array with all the names like Karthik. We also added Prashant. And we ordered Bob, like that. Hope you remember that. So we always try to get the value of the string array with Karthik is by getting the names index. You remember, like we put the names and then we put the index of 0, which gets me Karthik. If I put 1, it's going to get Prashant. And then if I put 2, it's going to get me the Bob. Something like that. But what if I wanted to get all the values one by one with whatever that I have got on that array? How do I actually do that? Well, you can do it using for loop. You can do it using the while loop. You can also do it with the for each loop. And I wanted to show you the for each loop. It's breeze. I'm telling you, if you use for each loop, you probably will forget using the for loop, but still for loop is very, very important while you wanted to do an increment operation. So that's when a for loop is still very, very crucial part of our automation testing as well. So you will be using a for and for each loop most of the time. But guess what? I'm going to show you the for each loop this time. It's also beautiful. So let's say if I want to print all the value of names this time. So I'm going to say looping statement statements dot for each loop, and I'm going to pass the strings array. How do I actually do that? Guess what? Because you know that this names variable is of type string array over here, right? I can directly pass names here like this. So this is how you actually pass a type of string array onto a method whose argument also expects a type of same type, like a string array type. That's why you're going to pass the string array there. And yeah, there we go. We got this for each loop with this particular type being passed over there. And now if I wanted to print the value, remember how do I actually do that? Well, as I told you, you can use for loop as well. Not a big deal. And I'll first show you in the for loop just in case, right? So because we are familiar with for loop now, it's quite straightforward. I'm going to use the same I is equal to 0 and I is less than or equal to what? Well, remember we have also saw a length from an array. There is a method called as length. You can use this length actually to get the for you, right? Like this length method actually does that for you. It's going to get the length. So I'm going to print all the values from 0 through that particular length. So I can just say the name is, and I'm going to say, oh, sorry. The name is this, like that, right? So I'm going to save this one. And now if I try to run this code, it is going to print the value for me. But if I put I, just tell me what is going to basically happen. Will it going to print me the name? No, right? Because I only has 0, 1, 2, 3 like that. But it won't have me the value. So how do I get the names then? You actually need to pass like an index for that array like this. I mean, it doesn't make sense at the moment. So I'm just going to pass, let's say I'm going to pass I this time, right? And let's say if I execute this code. So if I execute this code this time, you see that I'm going to get the names is 0, 1, 2, and 3 because I'm getting the I's value. But the names are sitting in the array over here, like string array, right? So if I want to get the names, you remember how we used to do that? We just put like names of 0 to get Karthik, and names of 1 to get Prashant, names of 2 to get Bob, right? So we have this as well within our I because it's going to give me 0, 1, 2, and 3 like that. So how do I actually execute this time? All I have to do it is I'm going to pass names and then I'm going to open the square bracket and pass I because now that I becomes an index for me to be executed. So now if I try to run this code will not work. And I'll tell you why. Because you remember this array starts the 0 index like 0, 1, and 2. It only have 0, 1, and 2 value. But what is being printed over here is until 3. And the reason why this is happening is because my condition says I is less than or equal to names. And this is the one thing which I wanted to change. I want to make this as I less than this length. So if I make this time, it's going to print 0, 1, and 2. And then the condition fails because 2 is not equal to 2 because the length is currently equivalent to 0, 1, and 2, right? So if it's not going to be matching that value, and then it's going to just fail. Or maybe 3 is less than equal to 3 and the length is not going to match, and then it's going to fail. So now let's try to run the code and see what's going to happen. You see that it's going to print me The name is Karthik, the name is Prashant, and the name is Bob. So it's going to print all these three values for me over here without any problem. But let's say if I have the length is less than or equal to the names.length, and if I try to run this code, I'm going to get an exception after Bob saying that the index 3 is out of bound for the length 3 because we don't have that kind of value within our array, and it's just going to fail. So that's what you do in the for loop for you. And now the question begs is, Karthik, come on, you've been talking about for loop. What about the for each loop, right? How that is going to simplify as you've been talking about. Well, for each loop, the syntax is very, very straightforward. You just have to put a for, and then because this is going to be a string that we are going to be iterating through, you just have to put a type as string over there and create a variable here as name. Not names, but name. And over here, put a colon like that and put the array, which is going to be names. So essentially what you're telling is that you iterate for me from this array and store the first index for me automatically into this names variable. Cool, right? Like you don't even have to create like an index like how you did over here. It automatically does the looping for you. It also increments things for you automatically and also gets the indexed value from that array and stores that value into the names variable, which is quite cool. I mean, to be honest, this is awesome, right? So now I'm going to say if the names is going to be name, not the names, but this variable name. That's all I wanted to do. So let's say if I comment this code, I just put control / as a shortcut to do a comment. You don't have to go through this source and do a toggle comment all the time. You can just do control / to uncomment and comment the line of code. One more shortcut for you to learn today. Interesting, right? And now I'm going to save this. And if I try running this code, you will see that it is always going to print this value for me. And guess what? The good thing about this kind of for each loop is that you don't have to worry about the conditions like less than equal to or less than what that I have to pass all the time. You get confused with that. This one is always going to be taking care of things for you automatically. You just have to initialize a string of name colon, this is the for each syntax differentiation, and then the array, and then that's going to print the value for you over here. And one more thing that we can do with the for loop is that you can also make this string to a var type like that, like how you did with the initialization of your arrays. So you can do that like a var type, so you don't have to specify what type it is. And you don't have to care, by the way. So you can just do this way. And now if you try to execute this code, it's just going to work as expected. So this is the for each loop. So this is a bit more clear, clean, and easy to maintain code, readable code than compared to the for loop that you are seeing over here. I hope you got the idea, right? This is how the for each loop works. The last looping statement that I wanted to show you today is going to be the while loop. So I'm going to say public static void while loop statement. And I'm going to say int of count one more time. Pretty much exactly like the for loop that I did over here. I wanted to print it like for 5 times that I wanted to do. So over here, what happens, like if I want to print the fruits for the 5 times, like how I did over here, because the initialization of the variables was happening in the for loop over here, in while loop, you can't do all these things. So you see that it's like a while is the keyword. And here you have to pass just the condition. That is the only syntax that you can work with. So it just has the condition and it will have open and close braces. That's the syntax for you for the while loop. So with this, I have to do 2 things, right? Like I have to do a increment operation, and I also need to handle the initialization operation myself. So first of all, I need to do the initialization, like how I did in the for loop, which is going to be, let's say, int of I is equal to 0, like how I did with the for loop, pretty much exactly the same idea. And then I'm going to write a while loop, which is going to do a looping for me, but it's also going to hold the condition. So I'm going to say if I is less than count, not less than or equal to, because it's going to print until 5 from 0. And then I'm going to say over here as a system.out.println. So I'm going to copy this entire thing, paste it over here. And oops, I have not passed the fruit. So string fruit. And these things remains exactly the same. And then I also need to increment the value, right? Like I plus plus. So I'm going to say I plus plus. So I'm going to do that increment over here. See that? Like the whole for loop is been splitted into multiple lines in the while loop. That is what's really happening over here. That's why, as I told you, you will be mostly using the for loop, and for each loop, while loop, you may not be using it. And do while loop, I don't think we will ever use quite a lot as well. So yeah, just keep in mind that for and for each loop are quite interesting, and while loop is too much verbose, to be honest. So I'm going to save this line of code. And now if I go back to my first program over here, and let's say I'm going to do a looping statements dot while loop statement. And over here, I'm going to pass the fruit as apple. And if I pass, maybe not apple, let's say I'm going to pass berry. And I'm going to say 5. So that's about the while loop. And let's try to run this and see what's going to happen. See that? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to print the berries for me until 5 times, because that's what I have given over there, because it is going to be less than the count. So yeah, that's about the while loop for us, guys. And this is how we can work with the looping statements in Java. And this is one of the most foundational element as well. This is the one thing which is going to be helpful for you while you do a looping within an array or multiple values and then get all the values out of it. Remember, we used to do like a split operation in our earlier lecture. We got an array of values. If you want to get all the values out from a split, you can do that as well. And that is going to be interesting as well for you in the for each loop. For instance, if I wanted to do something like this one, let's say you're going to hold this value over here, and I'm going to say string sentence for LLM or large language model. I'm going to say this is my first program to get the tokens being used for large language model, something like that. So this is the string that I have got. And now let's say if I want to print all these values one by one by splitting them and printing them into the console. How do I do that? Maybe an interview question, to be honest. How do you actually do that? And if they give you an opportunity to use the inbuilt function, you can use the split. If not, you can't really use it. But I'm just going to use the inbuilt function this time. So I'm just going to say sentence for LLM dot, remember the split method that we used to use? I'm just going to split this based on a regular expression now. I'm just going to use based on a space. That's all. So it's going to split all the values based upon the special character, which is going to be the space over here. And I'm going to store all the values into a variable, and I'm going to call this as split value tokens. That's all. Now, this is the value which I can directly pass into my for each loop to get all the values, right? So if I'm just going to do that over here, let's say comment this berry code, and I'm going to pass this split token value into this method. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm going to split all the values of the token using the space. And because this is going to return me a string array, I can directly pass that string array into the for each loop statement method, which is going to split that value and it's going to print that value for me, right? So I'm going to store this, and if I run this code, you see that it's going to get the entire token for me. Like, this is my first program to get tokens being used for LLM. So every single value has been printed over here. Very straightforward. That's the looping statement, that it's so easy to achieve it in Java. And I'm telling you these are things that we are going to be using quite a lot while we write the Java programming using Selenium. So hope you got the idea. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. Catch you in the next one where we're going to be talking about collection frameworks.